What's up, everybody? Welcome back to a Titanovic's Deck Tech video. Today I have a really cool video, just gonna get into like some really cool cards and how they work together and how they work together so well. So we definitely have a new card here, and this one is very cool. Kind of like started this whole kind of new look for Aragorn, and Ral is just one of those really good legendary creatures. It has that Baral or Goblin Electromancer a passive effect where it lets all your instants and sorceries cost one less. And what's really cool about that is that it can also flip into a Planeswalker that also has a +1 that does the same effect. So it basically, whether it's in this form or it's Planeswalker form, it still retains those effects. Basically, when you cast an instant or sorcery, you flip a coin, and you can decide to flip Ral or not into this Planeswalker form. So very interesting card overall. Depending on how many instants or sorceries you cast in like a sequence, you can keep flipping that coin, and the more times you flip it, the more possibility for the amount of loyalty that this thing comes on the battlefield with. So if you on a turn cycle, if you cast 6 instants or sorceries, and you just let this thing roll, whether you're winning the flip or not, if you flip that coin over and, on your 6th spell, 6 instant or sorcery, this thing, and you do successfully flip it and win that toss on your last flip, this thing would enter with 6 additional loyalty counters. Then you can go ahead and ultimate it and get that, free cast of instant sorceries from the top 8 cards of your library. So you can, it's just kind of insane stuff, right, guys? So exile the top 8 cards of your library and may cast instant and sorceries from among them this turn without paying their mana cost. I'm kind of curious if you get to, I guess obviously if they're exiled for that turn, you could probably just cast, the other cards in there as well. But I'll look up the rulings for that. But that's a very interesting card. And it kind of got us onto this kind of wizard thing where, we're thinking about wizards because we already had like a really prominent wizard already in our Aragorn pile, which was Vadric. So this guy is amazing, right? Where it basically can reduce generic mana cost, like the colorless mana cost, depending on how powerful it is. And this works really good with Aragorn's +4. So anytime we cast a green spell, a target creature can get +4/+4 at the end of the turn. So if we make, for instance, Vadric a 5/6, then that 5 power, he'll reduce our instants and sorceries by that cost. So like the last March of the Ents, all of a sudden becomes a 1 colorless 2 green, and that's really good. And in fact, if we were to cast this, we had already casted our first green spell to reduce this to 3, and then we cast this again for a cheaper price. Again, we can make Vadric's power even higher, and now that 9 power would go into 9 cards and more looks at creatures and more spells. So what a phenomenal card. So basically we're looking like, what does high power creatures get us in these colors? And if we're going to go to instants and sorceries, we're going to be going in this direction. We're going to be playing lots of instants and sorceries and trying to get Vadric powerful and have that payoff for last March of the Ents and Rishkar's expertise. Similarly, you have a card like Savala. And this is also just another payoff for our high-power creatures, whether it's Vadric or it's Aragorn that's powerful, or even this card itself. We pay about 1, we tap this, and we produce an amount of mana equal to the highest power among creatures we control. It's unpaired to the amount of power and mana generation. And really, you don't find it anywhere else. And how consistent it is, it's very, very consistent as well. So let's look at some of the payoffs for these wizards and playing high-powered creatures. What exactly do we get? So let's see. So we get a card that's, for instance, like a Last March of the Ents, which is just absolutely fantastic. And once again, we're going to be having creatures in this deck. We're going to be having a whole abundance of them, really. So we're going to be balanced very well, and we're going to have some really nice finishers in here that will definitely be good for the Last March of the Ents. So this would be a great thing to generate tons of cards and tons of options with our creatures, right? And it can't be countered, so it's fantastic. Let's imagine that we Last March into the Ents into Xenagos, for instance. and all of a sudden we're putting like a very strong Aragorn onto the battlefield, you know, and it can swing for like commander lethal in EDH. So that's a phenomenal finisher. Of course, we have a Crater Hoof Behemoth, which is just another bomb, you know, and just one of those cards that's just an easy finisher. There's nothing really like it. There really isn't. So obviously there's some other, more cheaper, kind of budgety ones, but they just don't do what the Crater Hoof does. Here's Jetmir. This one is just another like crazy, you know, kind of bard class, kind of Naya. Crazy legendary for us. We have like a decent amount of creatures on the battlefield, and all of a sudden they have vigilance and double strike and trample, and it's just like, oh boy, you know, it's just it's a lot. It's a lot of pressure. Here's fourth eorlingas. That would just be a great card, like to like sink into it, like our, you know, Savala hit, our big Savala turn, or you know, even with Vadrik, you know, reducing that generic mana cost by, you know, so many, you know, just get more of these human knight creature tokens on the battlefield and then draw cards from the Monarch. Seems like a really good option for us. Here's some more payoffs for our, you know, lowering that generic cost to like basically, let's just make Return of the Wild Speaker cost green with a high-powered Vadrik. That sounds great. And let's pump up like, you know, one of our mana dorks or something else like that's not, that's a non-human, and then all of a sudden we're drawing a bunch of cards once again, just for a very low cost. And then proccing Aragorn over and over. Same thing with Rishkar's Expertise. You know, we're kind of getting into that, you know, you're getting into fantasy land, you know, like where you're starting to like draw an abundance of cards, you're netting mana, or you're netting, you know, casts here. This one, Rishkar's Expertise, will let you cast a 5 costs, 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. I love going like Rishkar's Expertise into like Escape to the Wilds. It's like one of my favorite like kind of interactive pieces where you're going to go ahead and cast a Rishkar's Expertise, and then you're going to go into an Escape to the Wilds and just keep your gas train going. It's just an abundance of cards, an abundance of looks at things. It really just kind of sets you up for really nice stuff. So we love all those interactions there. Escape to the Wilds. I just love this card at the 5 spot. You know, whether it's reduced or not, just playing it for that 5 mana, getting a couple extra lands in your hand and your land gas going, additional land drop for the turn, there's nothing like it. Here's the Escape to the Wild, the Great Henge. Just another payoff for our high-powered creatures. Have a high-powered creature, you know, and reduce this to 2 green. Sounds good to me. Now, also, we can also get our tutors, like, these become much better than like an Enlightened Tutor, because if they're reduced, like even if I'm only playing one colorless, one planes for this, I can go search up like a Xenagos. I could go search up a Bard class. I can go find an Annie Joins Up, you know, and it's just cheap. It goes right to my hand, so we love Idyllic Tutor. We also like Solve the Equation, which I don't have yet, but that's the blue version, which finds instants and sorcery. It's just 2 colorless, 1 blue. Find any instance or sorcery in your deck, put it in your hand. You know, fantastic. Just crazy, like no-brainer stuff here with these like nice cost reductions. Flame of Anor, also like a nice wizard payoff. Like what a fantastic card. We're gonna be having a few wizards, and other than the Vadrik and Rao, we're gonna have other wizards in here too, and they're all very good. Like for instance, a Veyran, just doubling up all our Aragorn triggers from our casting instants and sorceries, and it gets a little stronger itself. Nadu, you know, what's to say? I mean, it actually works with Aragorn, so it's not like it's more manageable here. You know, it's not like a commander where we're like really abusing it. It's more fair here because we're not going to have artifacts to equip, and we're not going to be, you know, playing like Springleaf Nantukos and making a build around Nadu. We're just going to be targeting it with a +4/+4 ability, or one of our other creatures when it's on the battlefield, and we're going to get that benefit of a card or a land on the battlefield. That seems more appropriate to me, that it's a target, maybe like of a non-artifact ability. That maybe that verbiage would have saved it, but otherwise this card is really toxic. Overall, I do think it's the arch enemy of the meta, and I feel like maybe Wizards intended that to make everything a little bit more competitive. Like maybe they like to, you know, put out a push card or a more push card that will be banned, because it really makes the meta like kind of try to beat the card. I feel that's a kind of like an interesting thing. I also think Tamiyo, the new Tamiyo, is kind of similarly powerful. The one that turns into the Planeswalker, the 0/3 flyer that just accrues clue tokens, that one is really nasty too. So I think in a constructed modern block, I think if you had like your Mox Amber, Tamiyo, and Nadu, I think you can really build a really nasty deck kind of with like counter spells and such off of that. I guess Shuko is the real nemesis in there too, right? So there's that. Some of the other wizards we're gonna get is the aforementioned 1-mana Tamio. They're just so good. She's just great on the one spot. Just starts drawing cards, creating those clue tokens. So that's fantastic. The additional wizard here is, let's see, we have Dreadhorde Arcanist. Dreadhorde Arcanist. That is the 1/3. 1 power, 3 toughness, 1 colorless, 1 red casting cost. It's a wizard. It's a 1/3 trampler. Whenever it attacks, you can play an instant or sorcery from your graveyard without paying its mana cost based on Dreadhorde Arcanist's power. It has to be less than or equal to its power. So if we have Dreadhorde Arcanist's power at 5, we can start with a pumped up Aragorn, pumping up 4/4. Then all of a sudden we can start playing like 5 mana instant sorceries from our graveyard when this thing attacks. Really cool payoff. So it's another wizard. There's Ral. We talked about Ral. Additionally, Baral will be in this deck as well as like another wizard that kind of will reduce our instants and sorceries. The predominant difference, it doesn't flip to a planeswalker, and if we counter anything, we could dilute. So that's the Baral. So we talked about Selvala here, Vadrik, and our commander Aragorn, just that awesome creature that just gets so many different value points off its casting cards with different types of mana pips and their mana cost. So like, for instance, with the Aragorn on the battlefield and I cast a Vadrik, I get to scry 2 and hit an opponent for 3 damage based on the blue and the red at the same time. Okay, so that's upon cast trigger. Let's get into our value here. Just kind of swim through this value. So we have our Esper Sentinel at the 1 spot. Bard Clash just for an amazing enchantment. We have so many red-green legendaries in here that will benefit from a cost reduction. Omnath especially, Minsk and Boo. These cards are not nerfed in this format. They're just so good, so powerful. Can just play games by themselves. Italy is a great high top end for us. We're casting cards from everybody's top deck when this thing enters the battlefield, and we're casting them. So with Aragorn on the battlefield, we get all the cast triggers from all the cards that Italy exiles, and we get those free casts too, which is really nice. We love Chandra just to basically double up our instants and sorceries. Will work really nicely with a card such as like Synced Stupor, where you're basically bouncing things. You can basically bounce, like for instance, a spell back to someone's hand and maybe a permanent they have on the battlefield at once, because this duplicates all the instants and sorceries once per turn. So really good with your instants especially. Glint's the Impossible, just a really fantastic sorcery card that, imagine that we just like kind of get into this with Chandra and we have 6 looks at things, right? And if we end up not using any of those exiled spells, they just become like little mana rocks that we can sacrifice. So really cool card overall. And really the generic cost of making this red, like a 1 cost red would be really good, or even just 2 with like a Ral. So then we have our Mox Amber, of course, good for, low to the ground 1 mana legendaries like Tamio, Ragavan, Skrelv. We have Soul Ring here for a little bit of mana. We're coming into all our like kind of generic ramp here that we usually play. We have a really nice Mana Dorks here. Fantastic. Bloom Tender especially has a good shout out here because it taps for amongst all the colored permanents we have. So just really kind of equalizes us against those, more efficient mana based, 2-color decks that really are so efficient with their mana production. This kind of gives us a little bit of an edge too when we play our multicolored spells. Fanatic of Ronas, just to add to our Aragorn, kind of synergy. 4 power more, we'll create 4 green with it. Similarly, Faberel will create the 4 different colors of the color pie, depending on all the different color permanents we have on the battlefield, so up to 4 at a time, 4 different types of mana sources. Just great ramp for us. We have Ruby for that nice legendary spot. Really fast mana there. Can get offensive, can get it on the attack. Roxanne kind of progresses our mana too and kind of interacts with the board, which we love. March of Swirling Mists. Fantastic protection card, can get offensive or defensive with this. Plaza of Heroes, just also a land that kind of protects us and also casts our legendaries freely. Giver runes for protection, Skrell for protection. Fantastic. Yeah, this deck is ready to go, and it took a while, but I'm so glad that you joined me. If you consider subscribe, go ahead, go check if you subscribe or not. Hit the button for me, man. I appreciate it. This is so fun. All right, Swords of Plowshares. This is this really great removal spell. Domri also can fight too, can fight or ramp, you know, so we can go to the -2 or +1. We really like that. Bar class colors too. We have Swords to Plowshares. Then I believe this one is the Bridward Battle. That's one we haven't acquired yet, but it's basically a land. It can be paid 3 life, or you can use it to give 2/2 to one of your creatures, and it fights another creature on the battlefield. Yeah, so it's a nice little proc for Aragorn. Could be a land. We like that. Mana Drain, one of the best, if not the best. Yes, so probably the best counterspell, right? Just that 2 blue, just like the same cost as a counterspell, but you also, if you counter, like for instance, a 7 mana tally, you get to create 7 generic mana on your next main phase and spend on whatever you want. But make sure you spend on your main phase or you'll lose it, you know? So we love Mana Drain. Also, going to acquire a Sink to Stupor. Yeah, so that's on its way. So that one is phenomenal too. I kind of mentioned that's a land, or it can just bounce a spell already on the battlefield, or the one that has just been cast back to someone's hand. Interesting. Now this is going to be the we're getting into our lands that have value. So this is the Pinnacle Monk. So I haven't got the Pinnacle Monk yet, but Pinnacle Monk will be like amazing as well, where it's just basically shooting back a card from our instant or sorcery back to our hand. It's a 3 colorless, 2 red. It's a 2/2 monk. I just love it with like a Last March of the Ents just to pop back, you know, anything that we want. We can pop back like the Last March, or, you know, maybe some sort of interactive piece like a March of Swirling Mist. Whatever we need, like we can just have it. Also very good with like the Balaged Recovery. You can kind of loop these things over and over again. Witch Enchanter, just to act as a land, or just destroy an artifact or enchantment for that 4 spot. And then we got some really nice lands here, like a Cavern of Souls to like make our Aragorns and our other humans like, you know, uncounterable, or whatever we need for that very moment. You know, if we sequence it a particular way, if we want something else that won't be able to be countered, we have our Cavern. You have Jawari Disruption here, just a nice land that can be as a counterspell. Spikefield Hazard to like hit those like kind of problematic 1-drop, you know, elves and such. We can just kind of Spikefield them, get them behind a little bit. We're gonna act as a land. We have a little Shatter Skull Smashing here. A little more interaction is always nice. Kazul's Fury, just to go face if we need to go face. Later on with a high-powered creature on our battlefield. Turn Timber Symbiosis, just for that nice tutoring effect. Seagate Restoration and draw some cards here. Really good with our cost reductions. Amaria's Call, fantastic. And now we get into our graveyard. We have the nice new Surveil lands. We're playing those predominantly. So we have Hedge Maze, Thundering Falls, Commercial District. We can fetch Commercial District. We fetch these up, put cards into our graveyard, and that's what we want to do. We want to build our graveyard. So finding like a good mana base is really important for this. I've kind of limited all the channel lands. I do have a couple basics just to kind of keep us a little bit responsible here, just in case there's some land hate. But we have all our different fetch lands here, which are very nice. So our mana is very responsible. We have to be too. You have to be really looking to kind of give yourselves the best chance, right? So City of Brass, Exotic Orchard, Command Tower, Mana Confluence, then all of the shock lands, of course, just goes through here. So really nice stuff here for our mana. Then we have our commander lands that just become basically untapped if we have 2 more opponents. And we really need all this color fixing. It's really hard to play 4 colors, so we need to give ourselves a chance with all this. You know, I'd like to play like all the channel lands, you know, but, you know, we'll keep some basics in. But I basically have to like kind of take some of them out in favor of those basics just to kind of keep it responsible for us. And, you know, I think 2 basics is nice. You know, but otherwise it's just devoted to dual lands and like rainbow lands, you know. That's pretty much the basically the gist of that. So let's see here. There's one more part about this. That's our graveyard. The graveyard is like probably one of the most important parts about this. So we really want to kind of emphasize like taking advantage of all of our graveyard stuff. So pages here. That looks good. So just getting into our graveyard here, we have this delve spell, like a dig through time is very good. So we can actually pay cards out of our graveyard to pay for that generic cost. And this is so good with our cost reduction anyway. So we might not even have to pay, a lot into this. So just another fantastic thing that will kind of get us into our deck. Balaget Recovery, just to get back into our graveyard. Return target card from a graveyard to hand. We have Big Score to kind of selectively loot into our graveyard, and then also put some treasures and some cards in our hand to progress us. Mizzet's Mastery to get into that graveyard. We want to overload this thing and cast all our instants and sorceries at once, but maybe we'll just cast it for its 4 costs and get like a Last March of the Ents or a Rishkar's Expertise. Lauren Revealed, just to get the island cycle, it gets into our graveyard, and then it gives us like an option for that Mizzet's Mastery maybe later on, or can just fix this, or we can just cast it. Prismari Command, just to give us that artifact and kind of looting effect. Maybe looting and just treasures, it just depends, right? Depends on how you want to use it. Probably for our graveyard. Treasure Cruise, also just gets into our graveyard. We can go ahead and each card you exile from your graveyard while casting spell costs 1. Such a high generic cost too, like could be very significantly reduced with the Veyran, and we could really storm off with a Treasure Cruise. Might not even have to delve, like I said. Then you have your Unexpected Windfall. Just another nice selective mill card that progresses us with treasures. Can get reduced a little bit. Not as good as Big Score, but they're both instant speed, so that's nice. Okay, and then of course we have Flage. This would be Flage, so this would be another nice one to get some value out of our graveyard. Flage is an Elder Giant. And then Uro is there, of course, so we have Uro to kind of take advantage of our graveyard as well. Get them in there, get some cards out of there. We just want to juice it up. And Faithless Looting is definitely kind of at that helm too, where it really gets into our graveyard and makes things happen. So that is the deck. It is a fantastic deck, and it is very powerful. And yeah, I think I kept it kind of cool. I think it's very kind of appropriate to kind of take out for a spin. So here's my Aragorn the Uniter deck, and this one was a long one in the making. It really had to come together, but what I encourage you guys to do, I think there's just 3 things to do with these 4-color decks. Basically, you want to make sure your mana is good. You want to have all those, make sure that you're hitting up like your City of Brass, your Mana Confluence, your Exotic Orchard, your Command Tower. Make sure you have all those lands that can tap for, different types of mana sources, right? You really want to hammer those down. Then you want to have your fetch lands and your shock lands and your surveil lands. And then these ones are just kind of on top, these commander lands. I think they're just very efficient. So, and then a few basics, but mostly just really, really responsible mana, right? Not playing like Urza's Saga. I'm not playing Mycosynth Gardens or any of those other cards that are kind of greedy. Just kind of really hammering down all the, because we are playing these lands too. They're not dual lands, like Seagate and Turn Timber. So we have to really step it up with our duels and our kind of our rainbow lands. We kind of have to play Mana Confluence. Cavern is probably one of the greediest cards in the deck, but I think it's just worth it. I think it's essential too. If you're in a higher powered pod, that are going to be really kind of suffocating you with counter spells. So here's that. And there's our protection and some of our interaction, our ramp package. So there we go. There it is, guys. So yeah, let me know what you think. How'd you take your Aragorn deck? And then I'll see you guys all soon. Bye-bye.